Today's show is sponsored by Do It. Cloud spend is just the surface. What really matters is how it drives performance, reliability, and speed to market. Do It Cloud Intelligence aligns every dollar to the intent of the workloads. Do It is trusted by companies like Fiverr, HackerRank, Current, and Superbet. Do It helps teams go beyond dashboards, surfacing hidden inefficiencies, resolving incidents faster, and aligning cloud operations with business priorities. One platform, unified signals, better outcomes across engineering and finance. Visit doit.com, that's DOIT.com, to unlock intent-aware FinOps at scale. Do It Cloud Intelligence.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Hello, everyone. It is Aaron, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. This week, we don't really have any announcements, so quick introduction. Just wanted to say for all of our listeners out there, as always, we are looking for guests and looking for topics and suggestions. Please reach out to us at any time or reach out to me directly, Aaron at thecloudcast.net. This week, we have a very interesting topic, and actually, it's a returning guest, Elliot Shmukler, co-founder and CEO at Anomalo, and we are going to be talking about data quality. And data quality is something we talked about way back on Cloudcast 598. So a little over 3 years ago, we introduced this concept and wanted to kind of bring it to top of mind for everyone and kind of get an update for everyone on what exactly does it mean and how it can help out your organization. And so we're going to kick that off right after this break.
Today's show is sponsored by Vasion Print. The problem with print is it's a resource suck. IT teams are spending too much time on troubleshooting and upkeep. The biggest offender? Print servers. So get rid of them. Swap your outdated, resource-intensive infrastructure for Vasion Print, formerly known as Printer Logic, and get serverless, direct IP, secure printing for any device, anywhere. Centralized print management reduces overhead and workload and increases productivity, which is great for your IT team and your bottom line. Increase security, remove scripts and GPOs, and enable self-service user deployments. Secure, seamless, and scalable. That's what you get when you eliminate print servers. See how at vasion.com. Today's show is sponsored by Factor. Is your help desk still asking security questions like, what's your mother's maiden name to verify callers? If your organization uses Okta, Factor Identity Portal transforms caller verification, allowing you to authenticate users instantly using their Okta-enrolled MFA factors like SMS and Okta Verify. Reduce call times by 60%, eliminate social engineering risks, and streamline help desk operations with one unified dashboard. Check out Factor's Taco AI, the first AI agent for Okta, on their website. Visit factor.io, that's FCTR.io, and you could try it free for 60 days. Time to retire those security questions and switch to 2025 standards.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we have what we're, I guess, referring to these days as an alumni show. We have a returning guest this week, and we're going to dig deeper into a topic we started a number of years ago. We have Elliot Shmukler, co-founder and CEO at Anomalo. So, Elliot, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. It's hard to believe. So this is one of those, I will say this, it's hard to believe it's been 3 years since we spoke. I can't believe that. But the link is in the show notes. It's the Cloudcast number 598. And we kind of introduced the topic of data quality. And we're going to be digging into that much more today. But for those that are new to you, give everyone a brief introduction and a little bit about your background, please.
Absolutely. So I'm Elliot, co-founder and CEO of Anomalo. And Anomalo is a data quality company. So we help companies make sure that their data is actually right and ready to be used and trustworthy. And I'm a longtime product leader in Silicon Valley. So worked on a bunch of products that I'm sure your listeners have heard of, including Instacart, Wealthfront, LinkedIn. So have seen a lot and have used data throughout my career and have faced many, many issues with data throughout my career, which is what inspired Anomalo.
Fantastic. And yeah, first of all, I just wanted to say this real quick on that previous show that we did together. For everyone out there, if you haven't already, give it a listen. And I know it's not often I give a high praise or homework to our audience of like to go listen to some of the back ones. But the reason why I say that is the show and the concepts on data quality really are concepts that I've taken to heart and I utilize like in my conversations and how I think about things going forward. And especially as we move into AI apps, this idea is just getting more and more critical, right? And so let's talk about that, because I guess the way I've kind of always seen this problem, especially when it comes to AI adoption, is there isn't necessarily, I'll use the term, like air quotes here, a off the shelf, right, AI model, because, where's the organization's data, right? And so you have this like weird intersection and crossroads of like, hey, in order to serve the organization, it needs the organization's data, but there's no model out there that has that organization's data. And so you have to put this all together and ensure that you have this data quality, among other things. And so, like, first of all, does that hit the mark, when I talk about data quality, first of all?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And in fact, you're talking about one of the top problems we're seeing among our enterprise customers of Anomalo, especially as they're experimenting with generative AI, right? ChatGPT is great, but ChatGPT only knows public information. Right? Yes. It only has access to kind of stuff you can find on Google, right? For lack of a better description. And often when you're building something for use inside your company, well, public information is great, but you actually want your internal company information about your customers, information about your customer service processes and procedures, your internal product documentation, right? You kind of examples of what your best customer service agents do if you're building a customer service AI. And so you have to somehow corral all of that data and bring it to these generative AI models and bring the right snippets and the right collections of that data to these models to actually build something that works. And of course, while you're there, you don't want to bring bad data, right, to these models because they're just going to parrot what you bring to them. So you want to bring high quality data. You want to bring data that's vetted, data that doesn't have secrets in it or personal information in it or bad words in it, which we sometimes encounter in kind of a customer service context. So all of those are things you have to do to actually get the data ready for these models to consume before you really start building anything. Yeah.
And so you brought up a fascinating point there that I just thought of, and I just wanted to bring it back up, like the whole concept of PII, personal identifying information, excuse me. Yeah. But I mean, because here's the thing, there's data quality, but there's also like, is it correct or not? Well, somebody's personal information may be correct, but you can't do that anyway, right? And so like you almost have this quality in a couple different vectors, right? You have this idea of even before something is ingested, is it correct? Is it the right way? Is it both correct from a truth standpoint, but also correct from a data compliance standpoint as well? And so you almost have this like before it comes into the model or before it comes into the workflow in the system, but then you also have this after the fact of like, hey, you need to detect mistakes because you can't assume it's going to be perfect going in. And you have to mitigate that, and you have to do some kind of root cause analysis to make sure it doesn't happen later on in the future. And so how does that cycle work of like both before and even during and after in most organizations today? Yeah. Or I guess maybe how should it work?
Absolutely. So let's talk about how most organizations structure this and how they should think about it. So most folks view this as a kind of a pipeline, right? You have a sequence of operations that are ingesting your data from somewhere. Now, sometimes that's manually entered data. Often these days, that's sort of machine produced or machine tracked data that you're ingesting. And then you're kind of transforming it over time through a sequence of operations for different uses, right? So the way you want to consume a particular piece of data in a dashboard to track your business might be very different from the way you use that same data for a generative AI application or for some sort of comprehensive analysis or report or to feed to another machine learning model to make recommendations. So often you're ingesting these data sources and then you're transforming them in various ways. You might be combining them with other data sets. And organizations build these kind of sequential pipelines to do that. And the truth is you actually should be monitoring for data quality at every step in that pipeline. You mentioned something earlier where you want to check it when it comes in and kind of want to check it at the end. That's true. But you actually also want to check it all along the way, because you're going to have some code and some transformations and some logic at every step of the way that's changing this data, that's transforming this data, that's enriching this data. That can go wrong, right? I've had situations in prior companies like Instacart where an engineer would check in some bad code into one of the pipeline steps, and suddenly data was lost from that step forward, right? Now, it was correct when we got it, but some bad code ran, and now that data was lost, and when we tried to use it, it wasn't there anymore. So you actually need to be kind of monitoring every step of your data transformation.
And so that kind of takes me one step further of like, okay, kind of like we were talking about with models and data, like there's no easy button, if you will, but I'll kind of propose it a slightly different way. What are the most common use cases today where folks are seeing data quality issues? Because data quality to me, it could be a binary, like the information is right or wrong, or the answer or the result is right or wrong, but it could also very easily be gray. And so how do you determine, especially in those gray areas, how you report on that result or how you raise that flag out? Like, how do you even know you have a data quality problem?
Yeah, no, it's a very complex question. It's actually one of the hardest questions to answer for all companies out there. So one of the ways we approach it at Anomalo is we say, you probably have an issue if there's some sort of big and unexpected change in some characteristic of your data, right? Now, that won't catch 100% of possible issues, but it's a really, really great indicator. If it used to be, just to give a silly example, let's say you're a big restaurant chain. We have many customers like this. And it used to be that your data set of sales from your restaurant chain, 5% of the sales came from the Boston area, right? And today, it's 2.5% of sales coming from the Boston area. Well, that's a pretty big change. That's a pretty big deviation in how your data was shaped and distributed normally. That could indicate some sort of issue, right? Maybe some data is not flowing from Boston, right? Or something else like that is happening. So we fundamentally believe that it's very difficult to precisely define, this is what high quality data looks like. And a lot of organizations actually do try to do it. They try to build rules and all these kinds of very, very time consuming, hugely manual, and impossible to kind of cover everything. So we start with the fundamental approach of, okay, don't define it, but let us spot unusual changes in your data, because those are likely symptoms of some sort of issues, right? So this could be missing data. This could be data that's late, that did not arrive on time. This could be data that's decreased significantly in volume in some respect. These could be metrics computed off your data that change their distributions, have outliers, are too high or too low today than we would expect them to be. All of those things we kind of automatically spot for you and alert you to those things, of course, if they're a big enough change, because they're very likely indicators that something is wrong.
Sure. So, and it also really, to me, I kind of takes me one step further of, okay, we have this complexity when it comes to AI of the pipelines and the workflows seem to be getting more and more complicated, especially as we move towards agentic AI.
Yeah.
You've got, hey, there's just a model and I could just fine tune that model. And that's probably your simplest thing. But then there's like, oh, I'm going to add a RAG pipeline. And then, you might have data quality issues in the vector database or, I'm just thinking out loud. I don't even know if this would be possible, but like, especially with agentic AI, it could be something with the MCP, interface and how some, so how do you also then tackle this? Like, it's not just one link in the chain, but potentially lots of data sources and lots of different, like this whole concept of a lot of the data comes from unstructured sources, right? Like a lot of the data for organizations today might be just completely unstructured and not in a database. And how do you even begin to wrap your head and the company's systems around that?
Yeah. Well, it's a two-pronged approach, right? Number one is, we believe you should be monitoring everything, right? Kind of every source of data that's important to your pipeline. First of all, you should be bringing that into your data lake or your data warehouse environment where it can be kind of tracked and viewed and accessed, right? And monitored, right? So even kind of the outputs of an MCP server, for example, might be things that you log into your data warehouse or your data lake, so those can be monitored, right? Or your interactions with a large language model. A lot of folks are starting to do this, where every prompt they send to a large language model and every response they get for whatever use case they're building, they're logging somewhere. They're logging into their warehouse or their lake. That gives you incredible ability to monitor what's going on, right? And make sure it's kind of running in a consistent way, producing the results that you want. The second piece of this, particularly in kind of a more AI world, a more agentic world, is what we at Analo call benchmarking. A lot of folks also call these evaluations or evals, right? You should have kind of a series of tests, if you will, for your model or for your Gen AI workflow, a series of tasks that you constantly apply that workflow to assess whether it's still producing the results that you want, right? And every time you change your vector database or you change your pipeline or you change the underlying model, you should be rerunning that benchmark, rerunning that eval to sort of confirm, am I still getting the results I expect, right? Are the results better or worse? Maybe they're better in some categories, worse in others. That's something that's worth looking into. So that is something that everyone who's thinking about building these agentic flows, building these generative AI flows, should be thinking about. How do I evaluate the performance of these workflows? How do I have a standard set of tasks that I can always run through to kind of get an assessment of, is this working the way I expect?
Yeah, I love that. And actually that concept of predictable results is something I will bring up when I talk to folks about AI a good bit. And I'll kind of use the example of you take one of the big cloud services, and if you ask it a question today and you ask it the same question 6 months from now, well, you might get a different answer. It might be a different version of the model. The data sets they're using are constantly evolving. It's a big black box, right? You're asking a question, or you're asking it to generate something into the big black box, and what it's using to generate the output might be different, right? And at least in my experience, a lot of organizations, that's a non-starter sometimes. Especially, if you kind of move into highly regulated spaces, right? That answer needs to be consistent. It needs to be repeatable. It needs to be predictable, right? And that's where like things like model drift or data drift or hallucinations, like they all just hinder this concept of really mass adoption, because I think there's that lack of confidence in the results, right? And so like, how do you advise organizations that are, where this is a fundamental problem, to tackle that lifecycle management and predictability over time? Like is it as something as simple as like, hey, I'm going to treat this like an application and I'm just going to give it a version number, and here's the data set, the version 1.0 model and data set, and here's the version 1.1 and the 1.11, and like, what is, I know the answer is probably it depends, but what is the, the kind of entry point into managing this?
Yeah, there's a few strategies, and you're right to talk about this issue. This is one of the core changes, kind of core mindset changes that organizations have to recognize about building in this new world, building in this world of AI, right? It used to be when we built code, you give it the inputs A, B, C, and you always got the answer D, right? Until you change that code or something else crazy happened. But it's just not true anymore. You can give a model the same prompt 3 times and actually get different answers, right? Forget about hallucinations and all those other things. And so you have to, become comfortable with non-deterministic answers. And the way you become comfortable with that is by applying kind of these benchmarking, these statistical tools to say, okay, I can't guarantee that it's going to give me exactly the same answer, but I can manage it, right? I can catch situations where the answers might change because I'm feeding it different data or I'm using a different model under the hood. And I can run a statistical process where I run it through a bunch of situations, right? And make sure I'm getting something that's close enough to what I want. Again, it won't be 100% the same, right? But close enough, good enough, right? By some estimate, by some judgment. And so you just have to get into the habit of doing that. And versioning is an important part of that. You want to understand when the versions shift, right? When the model versions shift, for example. When you're building in the enterprise, you don't have to accept the same things we do as kind of cloud chat GPT users where the model changes under us and we don't know, right? If you're calling it through the APIs, you actually have very fine-grained control over the version of the model that you're using. And so you can keep that consistent until you're ready to move to the new one. But when you are considering moving to the new one, you need to be running these benchmarks and these evaluations. They just need to be part of your core process of how you develop these kinds of products. And you need to be comfortable with using these to kind of assess whether you're okay moving forward, right? And whether you're going to be good enough and consistent enough with what came before to move forward.
I like that. Thank you. Well, and one final question that kind of popped into my head while we were talking about this concept of monitoring the systems earlier, for all the cloud and system architects out there, when we're talking about Anomalo and this kind of monitoring inputs and outputs throughout the systems, tell everyone a little bit about what that means, because in my experience, you kind of have I'll say in the middle of the wire, if you will, if everything has to pass through it, or you kind of have outside monitoring, if you will. When it comes to, hey, I want to have this really look at predictability and data quality of this. How does exactly that work when you have these complex workflows? Is it in or out, I guess, is the best way to start. Right?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if it's in or out, but I'll explain how it works. We're relying on a very basic fact and kind of an emerging trend over the last few years of everyone saving all the data they care about into a data lake or data warehouse, right? You have these big platforms like Snowflake, Databricks, Google BigQuery, right? They're just becoming these massive repositories of all the data that the enterprise cares about. And not just the kind of clean data that's ready for use, but also the raw data, also the data that's mid-transformation, that's being changed and altered and augmented. And so we're relying on the fact that all of that data is there. And all we have to do is kind of connect to these massive centralized platforms and monitor the data, right? As it moves along from table to table and from step to step, right? We don't have to integrate with a million different systems because chances are you've done that to sort of bring this data and centralize this data for yourself, for your enterprise. And so we're really connecting to your kind of central repository of data and monitoring everything there that you care about.
I love that. Yeah. It makes perfect sense. And I'll just mention too, there is a link in the show notes about it, but there is, Snowflake did an additional investment into, recently and certainly other good things that have been happening recently for you. So certainly congratulations on that, Elliot. for everyone out there that kind of wants to get started or learn a little bit more, what's the best place they can get started?
Yeah, absolutely. 2 resources that I'll suggest. Obviously, you can go to anomalo.com. That's ANOMALO.com. So kind of anomaly without the Y. The Y is replaced by an O at the end, if you know how to spell anomaly. We also have a great book on automating data quality at scale that you can buy on Amazon. It's an O'Reilly book written by our chief scientist and my co-founder, Jeremy Stanley. So if you wanted to dig deeper into some of these topics and how we approach data quality monitoring and how we use AI and machine learning within Anomalo and to help you with data quality, that's a great resource.
Fantastic. Well, Elliot, thank you very much for your time. I certainly appreciate it. And we'll try not to make it 3 years until the next time we have you on the show. So thank you very much. And for everyone out there that's listening, thank you very much for listening this week. We certainly appreciate it. And if you enjoy the show, please tell a friend or please leave us a review if you can leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we're always looking for feedback, show@thecloudcast.net. On behalf of Brian, who wasn't able to make it this week, and myself, thank you everyone out there for listening. And we will talk to everyone next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.